Hey, this is Unit 5 Bacteria Through Plants. We're looking at viruses and Protists 5.2. Here we go. Here we go. Okay, here we go. So this is Ebola. Ebola is a virus. Are viruses living things? I don't know. We'll talk about it. We talked about the characteristics of living things, right? And how all living things have cells, all living things have metabolism, all living things kind of grow and develop, right? And so viruses didn't count as living things, but there are a lot of things that viruses do that do kind of make them seem as if they're living. They reproduce and they kind of take over organisms and use their machinery. Well, how do they do that? Let's talk about virus reproduction. There are some steps here. I don't really like the numbers they have on here, but so I'm not going to use them. You can do what you want. So the first thing is that a virus attaches to the host cell. We see that up there at the top. The virus is represented by the yellow hexagons with the squiggles in them. And so the virus comes in, attaches to the host cell, and then notice it kind of floats in there. The cell kind of lets it in. And you see at 3 there, the little squiggly, that represents the viral DNA. And so what happens to the viral DNA is that viral DNA gets injected into the host cell. That'd be step 2. And then in step 3, what you see happening here with this sort of process is the virus is having its DNA replicated and its proteins are being made, right? And the viruses are made of 2 things. Viruses are made out of proteins and DNA or RNA, some sort of genetic material, usually DNA or RNA. All right, and so they're having their proteins assembled, they're having their DNA replicated. Why would they do that? Well, essentially the cell is making new virus. And so the virus comes in, kind of takes over the marching orders for the cell and uses the cell to actually make new pieces for itself. Those viruses will assemble and then burst out of that cell, killing that cell, releasing all those viruses to go out and do the same thing. It's viral. That's where the word comes from. Crazy how that works. All right, so there are a couple of life cycles that you need to be familiar with for viruses. What I just described to you, the virus attaching, coming in, reproducing, and bursting out of the cell, we would call that the lytic cycle. All right, you see there on the left-hand side of this, the viruses replicate, and then lysis, remember lysis, breaks the cell open, viruses go out and do the thing. The lysogenic, and so first of all, for lytic, the word I would use there would be active. This is when the virus is active. Lysogenic is when the virus is dormant. The virus attaches to the cell, gets in there, gets all nice and cozy, right? Doesn't really become active, doesn't replicate, doesn't do the thing. But the cell will start making that virus DNA, and that viral DNA will become part of the cell's normal genome, right? And so eventually something will trigger that virus to become active, and then that lysogenic cycle will enter into the lytic cycle and become kind of virulent again. And so the word that I would use for lysogenic cycle would be dormant, right? So you got lytic was active, lysogenic is dormant, and that but can become active. That's the important idea there. Speaking of active and dormant, vaccines. A vaccine, you've probably heard it said that a vaccine is a dead virus. It's okay, we'll take it. Teaches your immune system. So that's the main idea behind vaccines is they teach your immune system in order to fight the real virus. It's like an inactive version of the virus. It's an inactive version of the little part. So how do I explain this without going into detail? Your cells basically recognize viruses by their coding, right? And so the cell recognizes that coding and then brings them in and then learns how to fight against it. Well, if the vaccine just has a piece of that coding in it, what was interesting about the COVID virus is it actually put the DNA, or the RNA in that case, in you and caused your cells to react to that and produce antibodies that way. So that was kind of a new technique for making vaccines. Vaccines are necessary against viruses because antibiotics won't work. Antibiotics are medicines that target bacteria. They target the cell's machinery, whether the cell wall or the parts of the cell that make replication or proteins or whatever. And so viruses don't have those things, and so a vaccine is necessary because it basically kind of prepares your immune system for future contact with that virus so that when you actually come in contact with it, your body's a lot better than it should have been. So vaccines, good things. Protists. This is a new type of organism. What is a protist? A protist is a eukaryotic cell that is not a fungus, plant, or animal. Weird definition, I know. But long ago, when we first started classifying things, everything was a plant or an animal. And then we realized that there's probably some other stuff, right? Like fungi are their own little thing. And so then we realized that, there's these things that aren't really plants. They're not really animals. They're not really fungi. They're not bacteria either. They're eukaryotic. And so what can we call them? We're going to call them protists. And so interesting thing about protists is they kind of match any of the other things. So there's animal-like protists, there's plant-like protists, there's fungus-like protists. Let's look at them. There's 3 kinds of animal-like protists. The first ones are called zooflagellates. How do you think they get around? Well, I'll tell you. It's in their name. Flagella. This is the euglena. They actually can do photosynthesis, interesting enough. And you can see the little flagella, this little whip-like thing right here. See this little, it's like a flagella. And there's one right there too. And that's how they move around. Zooflagellates. You don't need to know the name of that. It's just sarcodines. Sarcodines get around on pseudopodia. Word of the day. Pseudopodia, pseudo means false. Pod, or P-O-D, pod, means foot. And so false foot. And so what does that mean? Well, they basically stretch out their arms. They're like, those aren't arms, Mr. Chipman. Of course they're not. They're like arms, or they're false arms, or false feet. Right? And they kind of reach out and grab a piece of land and pull the rest of themselves forward. Or they like wrap stuff up and they're little pseudopodia. These are like amoebas. That's how they move. What's next? Ciliates. How do they get around? Cilia. Remember cilia, hair-like structures on the outside of a cell? Well, you can see this one's covered with hair. Not covered with hair, it's covered with cilia. That's how they move around. Ciliates. I always thought that picture looked kind of like a slipper or something. That's pretty neat. And then there's sporozoans. Sporozoans are interesting. They don't move on their own. They are parasites and they require a host. Lots of news about this right now, actually, as I'm making this video. There's kind of this mosquito thing going on. Mosquito thing's been going on for centuries. It's just fascinating that they're making news about it now. But whatever. So sporozoan, there's an example called Plasmodia. Plasmodia is a protist that is responsible for malaria. And you're like, I thought mosquitoes were responsible for malaria. They are. They carry Plasmodia in their mouth. And Plasmodia is interesting in that it requires 2 hosts in order to finish the life cycle. It requires mosquitoes and it requires humans. It lives a portion of its life cycle in a mosquito. Mosquito bites your arm. That little thing swims into your blood and gets into your liver and does the rest of its life cycle. And it's not good to have things do their life cycle in your liver, so it gets us sick. And it's very, very horrible disease, and it affects lots and lots of the world because a lot of the world doesn't have things like hospitals, and so or just normal care. And so malaria is a pretty dangerous thing. Sporozoans cause that. Animal-like protist. Moving on. Plant-like protists. Why are they plant-like protists? Well, they do photosynthesis, but they're not plants. They don't have cell walls. Algae is an example of a plant-like protist. There's some algae. Man, we're going to get it. We'll talk about algal blooms and that sort of thing. We get into ecology. That's what I think of when I see this picture. That little boy should not be swimming in that water. If you see lots of algae in the water, it's because they're eating something in that water that you would not want to swim in. Just leave it there. Diatoms. Diatoms are plant-like protists also. They are fascinating in that they make their own little glass case to live in. Not kidding. Look it up. They make a little glass case and they live in it and they do photosynthesis. They're plant-like protists. Moving on. Fungus-like protists. Why are they fungus-like protists? Because they are decomposers. They produce spores. They do some of the things that fungi do. And so that's why we call them fungus-like protists. I always thought this one looked like some crying scrambled eggs. And how do protists reproduce? They reproduce asexually and sexually. Remember these 2 words? Asexual means it produces a clone of itself. Sexual reproduction means that it produces gametes, right? We're going to trash the whole 1-parent, 2-parent definitions that we learned in middle school, and we're going to have better definitions. Asexual means that it makes a clone of itself, right? And then sexual reproduction means that you can have multiple organisms and they produce gametes. Those gametes combine together through fertilization, and that is sexual reproduction. The benefit of sexual reproduction, of course, is genetic variability, whereas asexual reproduction would be just speed and not having to find a mate.